So tonight and over the weekend, we're going to be talking about something that has absolutely no intention. So there's absolutely nothing to learn. There's nothing to understand. There's no suggestion here that anything needs to change. There's no suggestion that there's something wrong or something lacking. The suggestion is actually just the opposite, that nothing needs to happen, nothing needs to be understood, nothing needs to change. What's being pointed to is that this is freedom, covered over by the experience that something needs to happen. That experience that something needs to happen for the individual, for the person, is normally experienced as I am, here, a person. That experience of I am, here, a person, has the effect of the experience of a here and somewhere else. That experience is the experience of me being, or I being, in this body, and everything else being outside. So I'm an alien in the world, and I need to defend myself, control my circumstances, to find what I feel is missing. The suggestion in this meeting tonight, what we can share, and over the weekend, is that that experience and all the consequences of it are completely illusory. And that the reality that that experience covers is that this is already free. This, exactly as it is what's looked for. As we talk about it, it'll become obvious that that experience I am is unknowingly looking for this and avoiding this at the same time. It can't do anything about it. The experience of free will and choice that this I am has is also part of its own illusion. It doesn't have any. Because what it's looking for is this, and through its looking, it covers this over or misses this. The experience of separation that the I am has is illusory. There is no such thing as separation. When I say separation, I'm literally talking about the fact that the distance that appears between this body and those bodies is only an appearance. It has absolutely no reality behind it whatsoever. And all of the consequences that seem to arise out of here and there are also only appearances. They have no consequence. Yeah.
This experience of separation, how does it come about? I mean, why?
Well, I can tell you how it arises. So it arises in the body as it's a tension in the body, and that tension identifies itself as here, which is illusory. It's a belief. Here is a belief. And that here then identifies itself as I am here. That's a position. That position says it knows that to be true. That knowing is then at the same instance in everything else. So everything else then seems to know or is real. I am real, everything else is real. And that's the beginning of time for the individual as real. And that experience is illusory because the knowing part of that is illusory. It doesn't know that. There is no real or solid here. Here arises in some instances, the body knows how to get out of the way of a car. But there's no one that takes responsibility or possession of that experience, of that sort of knowing.
So that means separation is just a thought.
No, it's an experience.
Yeah.
So this, what's being shared here is completely impossible to believe. So if anyone here thinks they believe what's being said, the individual will be in that understanding or that belief which they think is being said. This isn't a thought because one could stop the thinking. It's an actual experience, which is the motor for all the efforts or energies to get beyond or underneath or behind that experience. So it is its own trap. It's just going around in a circle. It's not a thought. Thoughts aren't really a problem. Neither are feelings. It's the individual that thinks that everything matters, which then identifies with thought, collects thought, holds on to thought or feeling.
How does it come that this theme non-duality can be so fascinating?
How is it fascinating?
Yeah, why is it so fascinating? Because I've been reading now for many years books by Tony Parsons, Richard Sylvester, Lisa Cairns, and Jeff Foster, and listen to your videos, and I just can't stop it because I feel so home
Yeah, well, that's it, isn't it?
when I hear this.
Yeah.
So still there is this longing, this feeling there is still missing something. I'd like to step over a certain
Yeah.
threshold and then, but it doesn't happen.
No.
No.
Yeah, really it never will.
Can you explain that?
Well, like at the beginning I said there's nothing to learn, there's nothing to understand, there's nothing to change, because those are all sort of positive intentional activities that just reinforce the experience that there's truly something missing. The problem for the individual is there's nothing really missing. And in that sense, it's hopeless because it is a positive intentional experience. It can't do anything else except try. But what it's looking for is the end of trying, the end of need. So that's actually a negative. That's a loss. And it can't do anything about that. And in the end, what's recognized, or what's seen, or what's left is nothing happening, no distance. Now, there is already no distance. The experience that there's a distance and the individual needs to do something about it is the dream of the individual. So the end of that isn't really something that happened. Because the revelation, when that's over, is that nothing has ever happened. So it won't ever happen. When the individual dies, it's the end of something that never happened. It's the end of a dream. That's why nobody wakes up. Because the dream, the individual, is its own dream. So when it dies, there's nothing happening. There's no one left. There's no one to wake up. There's just this.
So when there's this feeling of recognition, recognizing the message, is that only the individual believing it's it has found something.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Because there's no feeling about it. As the individual dies, there's a relaxation, which seems to deepen. But what's revealed when that relaxation comes about is just completely unexpected. It's just always unexpected. So this isn't a spiritual message. It's not something anybody's going to get close to or even further away, which is the problem for the individual. And quantum physicists are pointing to this as well in some ways. I don't know if you know about, there's a new discovery. About matter, they found dark matter and they found antimatter. And they've just found something new which points directly at what we're talking about. And that doesn't matter.
Could it be viewed as a sort of a spiritual trap in a sense? That we kind of trap our individual inside there somewhere and in that way seeing it for what it is?
Non-dual, this what we're talking about as a trap.
Yeah.
That has some sort of intention to trap you so that you see what's really going on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that's what it feels like. It
Yeah.
becomes this place where you don't know where to go.
Absolutely.
And so you have to invent some sort of either spiritualistic thing to
Yeah.
follow or... Yeah. It's... Yeah.
Well, the point is the individual is completely trapped. I mean, for one, it doesn't actually have any free will and choice. It's not of its own creation. It's a reaction. So it's not the cause that it experiences itself to be. Beyond that, it's just a reaction to a reaction. So there's no real free will and choice within that. And part of the experience of the individual is the need for meaning, the need to make everything real because it experiences itself as real. That's a dream. Nothing is real. So it's completely trapped. So what it does in that trap and its apparent free will and choice makes absolutely no difference. That's the point, which it could never recognize or realize. Then it makes absolutely no difference. So if it uses this as some way to do something else, makes no difference. Has no effect. This is already everything. So if it's in there playing a game, then that's just what's apparently happening in there playing a game. It doesn't matter.
So the individual can't see the doesn't matter because it can't get out of that frame of reference.
Well,
it's in there assigning its own meanings or searching. It can't step outside and be the audience also.
it's the only thing in the apparent which does think or experience itself to matter. Nothing else does that.
Does the body have an innate desire for the relaxation?
Does the body have an innate desire for relaxation? it enjoy it when it comes about. It's obvious. It's the first feeling of it is
Is that the same relaxation as, like you referred before, the relaxation of death?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So, who speaks?
No one. No one ever does anything, really. But you're talking about this. Talking about this stuff. Yeah. This, what we're talking about here is unknowable. So it's unknowing. So no one knows it. What's being shared here isn't some knowledge that's been gathered or experienced and now being repeated.
Could you describe it as just reactions then?
Well, not in the sense that memory would be a reaction, because it's obviously not memory. I mean, we're parsing words, but I think I'd go for response. So, believe it or not, when I'm talking to my wife, I don't say no one's here or anything like that. It's only when somebody asks, does that sort of response come out? Or nothing's happening. Can you wash the dishes? There's no one here. That's not how we do it at home. But if someone asks, if there's someone or what is this, then that's the response. What I'm pointing to is there's nothing that walks around saying this is all there is or this is freedom. That doesn't happen. It only comes as a response because it's nothing that's sort of stored in here. It only comes out when it's asked, when there's some question about it, then it comes out.
Why do you suppose it's such a hard sell, basically?
Because it gives nothing. It's the most threatening message there is.
I've noticed that it's very easily rejected completely.
No, it's not.
It seems logical in a way.
No, the what's being shared, the report, is not really what's rejected. It's always a misunderstanding which is then attacked. If it's understood, it's never attacked. It's impossible to argue with this. So the argument is always in some way misguided, because what's being shared here has no position. So there's no way to argue with no position. And there's not actually anything being postulated here. There's nothing being told. All that's happening is there's a certain experience being undermined. But not by saying that there's something that needs to happen, but by just pointing out that it's illusory, which isn't a position. It only experiences a position from the position of the individual that thinks it knows it is. So when there's something here saying it isn't, it goes, well, that's bullshit.
Yes.
It has to, really. It has no recourse other than that. It's not in its experience. It lives in its experience. It thinks it knows how to survive because it refers to its own experience. And through doing that, it feels like it has control over its life. What's being shared here, not only is it not in its experience, it's never going to be an experience. It's not an experience. It's actually the recognition, the revelation that everything that arises is no experience appearing as experience. So it's life and death. And there's just nowhere in there for the individual. There's just nothing left for the individual in that. So there's nothing for the individual to even buy. So that's why it's a hard sell.
But somehow we still love talking about it a lot.
Well, for me, I've been doing this for a little while now, and it seems to me, like the man said in the back, it feels like home. There's something in it that I personally think everybody here already knows exactly what's being said. And in some way, this isn't sort of a permission. This is sort of like saying, yeah, you're right. It's not about anything. There's nothing that needs to happen. There never was anything wrong.
I listened last summer with my 16-year-old daughter, the talk between you and Evan Steinfield.
Oh, yeah.
And we were laughing so much, and she was
Yeah, it's
so,
a really fun
and
question.
she was so relieved afterwards. She
Yeah.
really made,
Yeah.
and she said, well, it was, she knew actually what you were talking about.
Yeah.
It was a huge help for her, but this help is of course also not real.
Well, it's not helping her.
No.
I mean, really, what we're talking about, I mean, just to be really clear about this, when this is heard, something dies.
Yeah.
That which dies is what wanted to be helped. So nothing is ever helped. Just the need for help dies. And what's left is was the fact that this doesn't need anything. This is already complete and whole. So it's just the need that dies. So nobody's helped.
Can you say that wholeness acts, speaks, or is also wrong?
Yeah, I mean, you could say anything, really. There's nothing wrong with anything. Wholeness acts, yeah.
God acts. God speaks.
Oh dear.
Oh,
What happens when you do that is you've got two things going on. You've got wholeness acting. Yeah. And really what's being talked about is the unbelievable reality that the distance and the words and the time and the space is equally unreal as it is real. So there's no real movement in it. There's no real consequence in it. There's no real distance in it. So there's no two for one to act and be something else. For wholeness to act, wholeness to speak.
Is it scary?
For the individual, it's probably the most terrifying thing it can hear.
And without after the
Who's
collapse,
there to be scared?
so it's not.
That there's no.
It's
What,
not scary.
what would be scary?
I don't know. Seems a little bit scary.
For the individual, it's terrifying.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it's not when it's
Well, when there's no one left to be scared.
no. But is it wild?
I mean, you know, when I wake up in the morning and put my feet on when the body wakes up anyway, to be correct, it doesn't feel wild. But when that says, is it wild? It's obvious, absolute chaos. It's anarchy. This is anarchy. It has no need to be what it is.
So,
It could be anything.
so something happens when I ask the.
Well, that's what I've talked about before, that this doesn't know any of this stuff. There's no need to know anything about what we're talking about. The communication here actually gives a sort of a misguided understanding of what's happening, because it sounds like this knows something, and that what's being talked about can be known, and that it's somehow a solid and real understanding of what this is. It's just not like that.
No.
What we're actually discussing is the end of a center, a here, which is at the same time the end of the distance, the space, and the time as real, leaving just everything as it is, which is not two. Just an isness, an empty isness that appears as all of this.
So the body doesn't have a need to be afraid. Only individuals.
Well, I mean, what is obvious is if a car comes rushing at you, fear can show up here, a real contracted sort of hot sort of energy that initiates some sort of movement, like jumping out of the way. But there's nothing left that then holds on to that and thinks, oh my God, I almost died. Wasn't that scary? Wasn't that horrible? Did you see that? They almost killed me. All that sort of extra fluff just sort of falls away. It's just not necessary. The whole thing becomes very simple. Like this is simple. The individual lives in a very complicated world because it experiences itself as complicated. So there's people dying over there, and there's wars over there, and my boss doesn't like me, and my girlfriend is unhappy with me. All that's going on all the time. And it's trying to control that and figure it out in its world, in its neurotic way, trying to make his life work. When the individual dies, all of that dies as a complication. The flip side of that is that the individual thinks it's special. It thinks that actually all of this is about it. And that's its whole investment in the whole thing, is because it's about it finding what it feels is missing, or what it feels it needs to be good or right. It's also where its judgments come from, because it tells itself a story about what this is about, and everything that supports its ideas of good and how it's going to find what it's looking for. Everybody that does those things are good, and all those things that don't support what it feels like it's going to help it find what it feels is missing, all those things and all those people are bad. That's how it makes its story up. It's not personal. It's not doing that on purpose. It's just a part of its story about what it feels this is about, and how it makes its way through it.
Is there, in your opinion, any valid way to suppress this need to have this experience of being here and attaching meaning to everything? Is there any trick, except breathing?
But that's the same thing. That's what I just described, and that's the individual saying that being an individual has something wrong with it, and it would be better if there weren't one, because that would then satisfy the need I feel, or what I feel is missing. That's the trap of the individual. That's exactly where it finds itself. Here, it just gets reduced to the obvious of the trap. Out there, it goes for money and all the other things, or whatever it does, and that's how it does it. It can sort of lose the reality that it's just going in a very small circle of how do I find what I feel like is missing, so that I can be this, so that this will be okay. The level that it's looking for things to be okay never is okay. The reality is that level is illusory, and when that level dies, it's recognized that nothing is okay, nothing is not okay. Everything is just what it is, and there's no need for it to be anything else.
So there is no need to have this notion of needing to fight one's own
individualistic there's no need, but there's no way not to have it. The individual is completely and utterly hopelessly trapped.
What? Just being aware of the circle and aware of the cycle.
Who's going to do that?
Well,
That is the I that's trying to find something else. It's the same with the I trying to surrender, the I trying to give up hope, the I doing anything because it's putting intention to what naturally has no intention. This already has no intention. The intention that you're talking about is no intention appearing as intention. It's completely empty already. So there's nothing defined in it. The claim of the individual that something's missing and something needs a change is a dream. That's the false claim. So nothing needs to happen. So every suggestion is only a confirmation that there's experience that something needs to happen. It doesn't. there's no such thing as separation. So there's nothing that's really happening. There's nowhere for that experience to happen which is looking for. Or said another way, there's never enough experience to fill up the emptiness that everything is. Everything's not enough for the individual.
So the meditative focus is also an appearance and a trend.
Well, meditative focus is meditative focus. The idea that that will bring about what we're talking about is a dream. Because it believes the idea that this isn't it. What's being shared here is that there's no such thing as separation. There's no real two. There just isn't. So all the claims that it needs to be bridged in some way are false. It can't be bridged because it never happened. The experience of it happening is a dream, which has no consequence. So it makes no difference.
But it seems to change everything. Yeah. Seems to
Well,
make
no,
sense.
not in the same way that you would think. No, for the individual, it would think it would change everything. When the individual dies, there's no one left to know anything happened. Like we talked about, I've said it a couple of times, this doesn't know anything about what we're talking about. It just really doesn't. It just doesn't come up. Why would it? Who would be looking?
For
Exactly, for anything to change. Who would know something had changed? It's only the individual that's trapped in that constricted need that's looking for a change from that. When that dies, there's nobody left to look. There's no one left to know that something happened. So this can only vaguely remember what it's like to be an I, to have an I, or the seeking experience of need.
So, do you have some opinion on a basis of morals in this context, or is that also just something, an apparent notion that something like that would even exist and forget about?
It's the individual's guideline
Yeah.
to find what it feels is missing. This is absolute amoral.
Yeah.
What is obvious amoral? Everything that appears, not only is it equilibrium, it's equally is and isn't. So it's not real, so there's no consequence to it. It's also, as part of this revelation, it's unconditional love. So it also has that quality to it. So the worst thing you can think of and the best thing you can think of are equally unconditional love. So there's no need for anything not to be what it is or to be different.
Yeah, okay, like that's really hard. That's tough. That's also a tough sell.
Well, for the individual,
Right.
it doesn't make any sense. It's actually
Yeah.
counterintuitive.
Yeah.
Because because it lives in a world where it necessarily sees this as going somewhere. And so the less bad you can get, however you define that, and it really depends on which side of the line you are, however you define that, and the more good you get, like the idea that when the individual dies, if all the individuals were dead, then everybody would just run around and be happy and nice to each other. That's the idea the individual has about what this should be. It's just part of the trap.
So there is no practical way to reconcile this either.
Well, there's no need to reconcile it. The claim that there shouldn't be an individual or there's something wrong with it is also false. The individual is equally what is as anything else. It's equally unconditional love as anything else. The individual lives in the hope that there's somewhere else. That this isn't everything. This is everything. There isn't anywhere else. There's no need for anywhere else.
Well, and like you said, and this is everything, and also at the same time is nothing.
Well, it's empty. As long as you say it's everything and nothing, so it's the same thing, it's nothing everythinging, then yeah, absolutely, that's what it is.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I just wasn't as eloquent. You mentioned the tightening, like the car situation. How do you reconcile like those physical discomforts?
Why would they need to be reconciled? What's wrong with them? Do you have an idea of what it is when the individual dies? It's not like that. There's a boundary of tension that the individual is in the body. So the individual is a tension wrapped in belief, calling itself knowing. And that's a tension through the whole body. And that tension literally creates the experience of a here and there. It cannot imagine what is when that tension and that here and there is gone. That here and there is illusory. It's just an add-on to the reality of no separation. So it has no idea of what this is, and it's not another this, it's just this, when it isn't. And it's much more simple than, if it knew what it was, it'd be disappointed. No cities, no special powers, except for the reading minds. I can read minds, just so you know. That's a joke.
You said that thoughts and feelings are not a problem, but attaching can be a problem.
Well, the individual is looking for meaning. So not only it'll take that movement, and because it thinks that this has something special that it's looking for, because it can't help to do that, it'll think that that's meaningful. It does the same thing with thoughts and feelings. It can't help but do this the whole time. It's constantly looking and looking, searching. It does it everywhere. As soon as this arises, everything is absolutely covered with the need or the search for meaning and purpose.
Is there anything to do about that? Can you
Well,
not attach?
Well, there are practices, absolutely. You can detach. If you have the right personality or the situation or a psychic guru, you can actually, the eye can detach from the body and realize all sorts of things in its psychic world. The eye is a psychic entity. It then can travel back into a psychic world of its own creation. That's called self-realization. You can do that. And what comes along with that is the feeling that you know everything, and then you can tell everybody about it. It's the ultimate specialness. But that has nothing to do with what's being shared here. This is the end of that. It's the end of that need. It's the end of the specialness. And when that falls away, the need for meaning and purpose falls away, and then a thought is a thought and a feeling is a feeling. It just doesn't. It's just what it is. It's like information.
So it doesn't help or it doesn't matter.
Nothing matters. It's only for the individual that things seem to matter, because it lives in a world where things seem to matter. That's a dream. This is already free. And it just happens to appear as something that experiences this as mattering. It doesn't matter. It's still freedom appearing as that.
Could you talk more about like that, the freedom piece and what that means to like the individual? I guess I'm struggling with that.
I guess it doesn't mean anything to the individual, because the individual will never be free. So when I say anything like freedom, what I really mean is absolute freedom. This is the absolute. This is infinite, in the same way that it's everything, in the same way that it's nothing everything, or complete and absolute emptiness appearing as everything or what is. Those are concepts that mean absolutely nothing to the individual, and with the individual can do nothing about. The individual has no place or reality within those ideas or concepts, and it has no relationship to them. It can't do anything with them. That's the reason those are the words that come up. So there is no relationship for the individual and freedom. There's nothing for the individual to know or do about freedom. The individual is actually freedom, appearing as the individual. It's also the infinite appearing as an individual, or unconditional love appearing as an individual. These are all just words for the unknowable this. So a word is never what's said, what's being talked about. So the absolute isn't the word absolute. It's this.
So what about then the pollution and plastic in the oceans?
You got a friend here. And the whales.
I have one more.
And the whales. And what else was there? There were whales.
Yeah, but I have now one more.
Right.
Artificial intelligence.
Artificial intelligence, yeah.
So I was wondering, is it possible to create separation?
So I'm sorry, it's a little unfair, but last time he had exactly the same questions, and he kept coming back with them and back with them. There's nothing out of place. There's no reason why everything shouldn't be polluted. There's no reason why the seas shouldn't rise. This isn't actually about something. This isn't about things staying the same or getting better or anything in particular happening. It's not about anything in particular. The individual thinks that it should have some framework. It should work in a certain way, because for it needs this to be about something, because it needs to find something that it feels is missing. When that dies, pollution is equally amazing as not pollution. It doesn't have any sort of value. Nothing has value. It's just endless awesomeness appearing as this. It's a miracle, a mystery. And it's not a mystery that then tries to make something. It's everything that is the mystery. This is emptiness appearing as this. I mean, fuck me, you know? Who cares if it's dirty? How do you even know it's dirty? Do you know what I mean? Where does the judgment come from? It just, this is it. So where is the space and time to realize or to make that judgment about it not being okay? Isn't it amazing that it could be dirty? Dog shit. Wow. Wow, that stinks. Wow.
Well, it's the only something that only like human beings and individuals are capable of creating. Pollution, plastic, and all this stuff.
Really? We have friends in Vienna that live in a house, you know, with more floors in it, and across there's a bird's nest, and it's been there for about 10 years, I guess more generations of them, and every year it throws out the most amazing amount of trash when it's building its new nest. It makes a horrible pile of dead bones and shit and everything down on the ground. And if you're walking underneath when it's doing it, you get covered in it. So it's not only humans doing it. No, but you missed my point a little bit with the judgment that it's better if it were clean, or the judgment that this needs to look in a certain way for it to be okay, or that the movement for it to be better, all comes from the individual's need to find something. The individual's experience that this is real, and so it's intentional, and there's a better this than what is. That's the dream of the individual. There isn't. There's no need for a better this. This is already it. So it's a mystery. There's no platform, if I can say that, for the individual to stand on to make something out of this. That platform is illusory. There's no platform, it's a mystery. That knowing platform that something could be different is illusory. Nothing is known. Do you understand what I mean by that? No. The platform, the solidity, the individual feels like I am here. And that I am here then sort of knows that this is good and that's bad. And that solidity is completely illusory. There is no solidity. There's no platform for the individual, what it experiences, the knowing. It doesn't know what it thinks it knows. So the consequential knowing, consequences, you know, the knowing out of that dirt is bad or pollution is bad, are just illusory, part of the illusory experience of I am. No. The individual wants something better because it feels like something's wrong with it. There's nothing wrong. Is that alright? Trying to get it simple, huh?
Or the preservation of the individual would then want maybe something cleaner.
No, well, the body, you could say the body.
Yeah.
You could say the body, self-preservation. Yeah.
And then you extrapolate.
But the point with the environment is that we're not programmed to think in millennia. So we can't actually register the threat that's coming at us. So the body's a little wrongly tuned, programmed for this threat.
Or there is no threat. Or
Well, I mean, if you want to talk about the environment, it looks very threatening if you ask me. It looks like it's not going well.
yeah. But that doesn't really matter.
No, it doesn't matter. There's no reason why. There's nothing depends upon it going well.
How about artificial intelligence.
What about artificial intelligence?
Because there was in Oxford this scientist wondering what is the biggest threat, and surprisingly, so the answer was surprisingly artificial intelligence.
Yeah, who's threatened?
Who's threatened?
Yeah. Who worries about artificial intelligence? I mean, the answer is it's a rhetorical question. The individual is the one who's threatened. And the suggestion here is that individual who feels threatened is a complete illusion. It thinks that this, or what it's looking for, depends upon things being a certain way. That's a dream. This doesn't depend on anything.
So there is not possible to create separation.
No, absolutely. Well, it's only the individual that experiences separation.
Do you suppose there's anything else that experiences separation, like this pillow on the floor?
Doesn't seem so. Well, I'm pretty certain the pillow doesn't. But, so you might think about apes and things as having some form of...
I'm wondering, like, where does this sense of separation arise, like, really, in this, like, deep, fundamental...
Well, it's really not that deep or fundamental, but what it is, it's quite, I've already described it once. It really is. When it falls away, it's also seeing how it's built up. You know, and so there's a tension that arises in the body. That tension identifies itself as here. This all happens just like this, right? So the tension here, I am here. That's it. That's how it happens.
And the separation arises at the same time.
Absolutely.
The
The
thought of,
separation,
I'm sitting here.
the need, the search for meaning, that all arises. It's all the same function.
Should I just avoid thinking that? Should I just avoid thinking the thought?
You're
that
not
I am
listening.
me- I am.
Costs more if you don't listen. Seriously? This has nothing to do with thinking. If it did, you could think your way out. The I am isn't a thought, it's an experience. Remember? That's why it's so hard to sell. Because the experience goes against, what's being suggested goes against the experience of the individual. Because the individual knows I am. And therefore me saying it's not is bullshit. Because it has no way to relate to it. It's not a thought. The individual attaches meaning and vilification to thoughts and feelings because those are things that bother it most. Those are things that really get to it. You know, it feels really bad and it tries to avoid that and it thinks bad things. You know, you get this thing going, you know, and that. So it wants to get away from that. And that's where these teachings of detachment come from. Because it agrees there's something wrong with those and if I could just detach from them. What the individual can't imagine is that those aren't actually personal. They already don't belong to anyone. Like this doesn't belong to anyone. This is just what it is, and thoughts and feelings are just what they are. They don't belong to anyone. The individual says they do. When the individual dies, what's revealed is they never did. Its efforts to move away actually made them into what the problem that it experiences them to be. It all sort of calms down when they die, when the individual dies. It's sort of soft. So anger is sort of soft.
this when every year millions of people go to see masterpieces of art? Is this the reason behind that people are longing for that? For this perfection, which is this? But they are
Sounds pretty fantastic.
So
If millions of
to see
people
the
go,
last
there's
supper,
probably millions of different reasons.
Pardon?
If millions of people go, there's probably millions of different reasons,
Yeah, okay.
apparently.
But behind these millions of
The individual is
people
always searching.
yeah.
It's searching for the end of itself, but it doesn't know that. And avoids it at all costs. I mean, this is the end of the individual. Not hard to find, really, if it were really looking. There's no judgment in that. It's just...
So there is no way of telling the individual to stop.
Well, what that suggests is that the individual isn't what is. That there's real separation. The experience of separation does not confirm separation.
So there is no intention in the universe.
Well, in the universe, I mean, it depends what you mean by the universe. But if you mean the stars and things flowing around and stuff,
Here.
this is just what is. You can't really call it the universe.
I can't.
Not really. Because that sort of makes it a thing. The universe. But nothing, in essence, nothing has any intention. You know, if you're talking about a cat trying to catch a mouse, there's obviously an appearance of attention. But that has no intention. The intention sort of implies that something should or needs to happen, that there's something missing or that something could be changed. And what the end of the individual is the revelation that nothing is happening. In a way that can't imagine. Nothing, literally nothing, is happening. There's no real distance, time, or space for anything really to happen. It's all already absolute whole and complete. And this is what whole and completeness appears as.